The girlfriend of a Boston police officer whose body was found
in the murder trial of Karen Reed after the jury said it was unable to
they
reach
will
a
retry
verdict.
Karen Reed
is
after a judge declared a
Hello, alternates, and welcome back to The Alternate. I'm Tab, your host for day 22 of the Karen Reed retrial. And whoa, today was a doozy. And we only had one witness on the stand. And I am telling you, it was something we haven't seen before. So let's get into it. Actually, before we get into what happened today with Dr. Judson Welcher, remember him from yesterday? Well, we had a little conversation in the beginning with Judge Beverly Canone about a ruling. Well, she ruled that Dr. Welcher can say the injuries that John O'Keefe suffered and the damage to Karen Reed's car are consistent with a collision that happened on January 29, 2022. However, he is not allowed to say that Karen Reed's vehicle specifically caused those injuries. So in other words, he can lay out all the puzzle pieces, but he is not allowed to say to the jury that that is definitive of what had happened. Okay, so basically it's the jury's job to put the puzzle pieces together, and Commonwealth is hoping that he paints a clear enough picture for that. Now the jury was let into the courtroom, and the prosecution kicked off the morning, continuing with Dr. Welcher's direct testimony. If you haven't listened to Margot's recap of day 21, I would urge you to go back and listen to that before we get into the cross-examination, because you kind of got to know what this guy is talking about to understand the cross. The prosecution came up for just a couple minutes this morning and had Dr. Welcher talk about two theories of the taillight damage. One theory was someone threw a glass at the Lexus. Basically, the taillight broke from the glass that John was holding, hence the damage to the arm. Again, he testified that the injuries to John's arm are consistent with being hit by a Lexus. So the translation, in my opinion, he really wanted the jury to believe that John was struck and killed by Karen's car. He made it pretty clear. Then enter Robert Alessi, defense attorney, cross-examiner, and probably the most exhausted man of the day. You'll see why. First thing Alessi did was hit the brakes on the science. You remember the little experiment from yesterday where Dr. Welch painted the Lexus taillight and then rubbed it against his arm in a demonstration on how John's injuries matched up. I mean, you guys, I know Margot talked about this, but he literally played crash test dummy himself, even dressing like John O'Keefe from that day, like the same color shirt and the jeans. Oh my gosh. Okay. Anyways, I digress. Alessi just wanted to point out that this was only one data point, and there is no proof that John was standing that way or John's arm was that way. And he questioned whether that one coincidence was enough to make a strong conclusion. Welcher, he basically said Welcher did not have all the puzzle pieces, not enough data points, not enough certainty, and he really honed in on how Welcher drew his conclusions and his theories is what he called them. Alessi warned Welcher that he'd be jumping around a little bit on his topics, and he did. And Welcher, right from the start, even before Alessi kind of said that he was going to jump around on his topics, Welcher really was combative. He was very, very hard on Alessi, did not want to answer his questions, and made every single thing Alessi said like pulling teeth. In my opinion, just watching from the courtroom, I could tell that Welcher wanted nothing to do with the defense. He made it very clear that he was a prosecution witness, and it was painful. I can imagine that Alessi left, needing a glass of wine or something at the end of the day. So when the first set of questionings was so difficult, I think Alessi kind of decided like, hey, let me go in and like hit you where it hurts, because this one raised some eyebrows, you guys. And I mean, I was actually stunned. So at first he asks Welcher when his firm was hired. Well, his firm wasn't even hired until September of 2024. Remember, this accident happened in 2022. Earlier in 2024, they had a trial, they had a mistrial, and this firm wasn't even hired until after the mistrial. So we're talking less than a year ago. And then he asked about payment. And this is where my eyebrows got like, what? First, the first contract in September of 2024 was for, I think, $44,000, which I was like, okay, like that's a lot of money to, do what you're doing, but it's not unheard of money. And then in April of 2025, that's right, April of 2025, that number ballooned to a whopping $325,000. What? Why? That's only, you guys, that's only like a month ago, right? Plus the $44,000. And you're asking why? I'm asking why. Well, we don't exactly know why. And another expense the Commonwealth would be hit with, no pun intended, by the way, is that they bought that Lexus, that crash test dummy Lexus. They bought that. And no kidding, Commonwealth agreed to cover the cost of this new SUV. And if Aperture sold it later, the Commonwealth would pay the difference, right? So like Aperture would buy the car, whatever it is, 60 grand probably or more. And then if they sold it for 50 or 40, the Commonwealth is going to pay the difference. So whatever it is. I can't even imagine paying that much money. I don't know what this stuff costs, but we're talking $400,000+ for work that's been done for, I don't know, less than 10 months. And this is your tax dollars, folks. This is where they're putting this money. Boom. Okay. Now, here's where it got a little messy. Alessi asked how much Welcher had been paid for this job. Well, Welcher claims he doesn't know, but then he says he signed the contract. So he then ended up saying like he did know, but then he was acting like he meant like how much did they actually pay so far in their bills. It took so many rounds. I'm not even kidding you. It took so many rounds for him to finally say like, yes, we signed a contract. Basically, that means that I'm getting payment for a service. This exchange was so irritating to me that I have to play it for you so that you guys can just get an idea of how combative this guy was and how much I wanted to pull my hair out. I can't imagine what the defense was thinking or the prosecution. I can imagine also that the prosecution does not like this much combativeness. It doesn't fare well, I don't think.
On November 5th of 2024, your firm Aperture was paid $44,500 by the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office to conduct work that was at least similar to the work of Trooper Paul, correct?
I have no idea. I don't get the billing or the statements.
Do you recall whether Aperture has, well, do you believe Aperture is working for free in this matter?
Oh, no, I don't believe that. No,
So
we're an engineering company. We bill for our time.
So you know that Aperture is getting paid for its work in this case, correct?
We are billing for our analysis work.
Well, you're not just billing, you're billing and getting paid, correct?
So I have not seen any of the payments. I would assume that we're getting paid, but I don't know that.
Sir, you are a senior vice president of Aperture, are you not?
I am.
You would know, wouldn't you, if your firm was not getting paid for work since September 23rd of 2024? Wouldn't you?
No, probably not. Usually it takes, 9, 10, 12 months of not getting paid before the accounting department reaches out to me.
You, as you sit here today, do not have a recollection of whether Aperture has been paid. Is that your testimony?
It has nothing to do with recollection. I'm not part of that process. We have an accounting department. I don't have any involvement in that.
So is your testimony you have no knowledge about any contractual relationship between Aperture and the Commonwealth?
Oh, no. I was sent a contract by the Commonwealth to sign, so I'm aware of the contractual agreement, but the day-to-day or month-to-month invoicing and billing, I'm not involved in that.
Okay. So you're aware there's a contract between Aperture and the Commonwealth.
I signed it.
And you signed it. And wasn't that contract obligating the Commonwealth to pay for the services of Aperture? Isn't that the purpose of the contract, in part?
In part, sure.
Yeah. It's a legal obligation of the Commonwealth. Your firm does work, and the Commonwealth pays for it, correct?
That's the idea.
Right. And so you know about that contract because you signed it.
Correct.
Also, you testified on direct that there was a purchase of a Lexus exemplar for your testing.
Correct.
Who pays for that Lexus exemplar?
Aperture.
And is that then cost passed on to the Commonwealth?
No.
So you pay for the Lexus, you don't pass that cost on, correct?
So what we're doing is we paid for the Lexus, we're keeping it till the trial's over, we're selling it and charging the Commonwealth the difference in the price.
Exactly. That was where I was going, sir. So,
But they're only paying the difference. So, and in theory, if we sell it for more in California, then we'll reduce the bill.
okay, I don't want to speculate. I just wanted to see what the obligation was. So
The obligation is the difference.
Exactly. So the obligation is the difference. Are you aware that on April 5th, 2025, the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office amended your contract? Are you aware of that, sir?
I am.
And isn't it the case that that amendment authorized the amount of $325,000 to be paid to Aperture? Isn't that what that amendment contract states?
I believe that's correct.
So the Commonwealth is obligated to pay at least $325,000, and is that correct?
That is you're asking me a legal opinion now about a contract. That is my understanding of how contracts work, but I'm certainly not an attorney.
And on top of that, are you aware that Aperture has been already paid $44,510 for its work? Are you aware of that?
The second time you asked me, no, I'm not aware of anything we've been paid.
You guys, I am telling you, that guy is the VP of executive VP, and you're telling me that he doesn't know if something hasn't been paid or how much people are paying. I'm calling BS Dr. Welcher big time on that. So now you see what Alessi was up against. A witness who was determined to be a brick wall. Well, from here, the tone in the courtroom started to heat up even more. And Alessi, he stayed pretty calm and firm, but Welcher, well, he started to snap. At one point, he actually really snapped at the defense and was like, no, that's not correct, in a pretty sharp tone, which I think the jury notices. This can actually be a huge win for whoever is cross-examining, and which is the defense. And in my opinion, I felt it was a win for the defense. Then Alessi zeroed in on Welcher's PowerPoint presentation. And he pressed him on this PowerPoint and his reports and changes that happened. He had finished his report in January of this year, 2025, and didn't make any changes to his report until May 13th, which is after the trial already had started. And after, witness Mr. Burgess, who also works for that company, remember him? He's the Mr. Bachelors of Science or Bachelors in BS, not of science. Yeah, that guy. Remember, he had new findings. So Welcher says, based on Burgess's new findings, he then changed his report. Now, this is when more sidebars came. And let me tell you, I haven't even talked about the sidebars today. It has been sidebar after sidebar after sidebar. So after more sidebars, more teeth pulling, finally, Welcher admits that his original report was in January. He updated it mid-trial. The defense implied that these updates were made after influence of the prosecution. And Welcher says, well, I removed certain testimony because the judge didn't want to allow it. So basically, he was really trying to say, like, yes, I changed it, but this is because I wasn't allowed to put it in. And that's what the prosecution was telling me. He talked about how many times he did talk to the prosecution, which in my opinion was far too many. And I find it sus. I really do. I don't like any of this. I don't, this is the star witness. And I feel, even as just like looking from the outside, or not the outside in, let me just say the inside in. Like if I was a juror member looking at this man, I would think that he was paid off. And he was paid off. I mean, he was paid $400,000 to be a witness for the prosecution. That's a lot of money. I would think that you would be able to like get somebody to say whatever you wanted them to say for $400,000. Not that that's legal. It's not, but you know what I'm saying. Then they went to lunch, and post-lunch, Alessi started tackling the injuries and force. He asked Welcher to calculate the amount of force needed to break a bone in the hand. And remember, there was no broken bones per the medical examiner. And Welcher kept saying, well, there was no x-rays, which is true. There was no x-rays on John O'Keefe's arm to tell if there was a broken bone. But per the medical examiner, there were no broken bones in John's arm or hand. Alessi tried to pin down that, he says, can a 300 to 400 pound force from the back of a Lexus break a hand? And, Welcher finally says, probably. Alessi showed photos of the Lexus and asked Welcher which parts could deliver that kind of force. Welcher pointed to areas near the license plate, the exhaust pipe, the spoiler, and then it got even more spicy when he brought up the medical examiner's conclusions. And Welcher was like, I'm not a medical examiner. Like, I don't know, he really just was, I'm telling you, he was so combative. It was crazy. And at this point, Judge Canone, I think, had enough of it. Like, she basically was like, you guys have to stop talking over each other one at a time. And she even called it a nightmare. She was like, it is a nightmare for them to understand, like, what's going on. Because I don't think that Alessi was trying to talk over Welcher, but Welcher wasn't answering the yes or no questions that Alessi was giving him. And he was trying to, I guess, make his point, but it was nerve-wracking to everybody. So much so, another sidebar was called, and then Alessi comes back and he talks about the Lexus driving onto 34 Fairview Road lawn. He asks Welcher if it's possible, and Welcher said, well, it's possible that it went on the lawn, but whether it's reasonable depends on the car's starting point, which they didn't have data on that. I don't know. Then came more kind of body part debates. Alessi asked about the horizontal orientation of O'Keefe's arm injuries. And Welcher agreed, more or less. And then he asked if John's arm was flexed like you did in your test. Would the injuries be vertical instead of horizontal? And Welcher said absolutely not. He referenced a slide number 117 to prove the injuries were perfectly horizontal at the end of the day. And then the end of the day finally was coming, and Alessi wanted to make one more point about confirmation bias and how his theories could be seen as such. And Welcher just said, I tried to eliminate all confirmation bias. And that was kind of all that got out from this witness today. The jury was dismissed, and they had another voir dire about additional slides that Welcher had that needed to be excluded from evidence, or that's what the defense wants them excluded from evidence. And so they had a little tidbit about that. And then they also said that tomorrow is going to be half day because someone in the jury has an appointment. And honestly, I'm amazed that they can get 18 juror members to be there every single day without some sort of appointment or an emergency. I can barely get my 6 friends to commit on one day for lunch. So it's like the fact that they have this is the first time that they have had to do anything for the jury. It's incredible. So we will see you back here tomorrow. Margot will be on day 23. And if you are enjoying our podcast, please rate us a 5-star and click the follow button right now. And if you really love us and you want to support us, you can go to Patreon. We have a few additional episodes already on patreon.com/thealternate. And again, I am Tabitha, and I will be back with you for day 24, and you'll see Margot tomorrow. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.